Mr. Chairman, your meeting is live.
Thank you. I'll bring this meeting of the Senate Appropriations Committee to order. And first item is roll call.
Senator Driscoll.
Here.
Senator French. Here. Senator Carew.
Excused?
Senator Larson.
Here.
And Chairman Salzar.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Great. So members of the committee, what we're dealing with today specifically is the General HB 001, General Government Appropriations 2. And we have Director Richards here. Please come on up. And I will give it to you, Director Richards, and take it away.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Don Richards, LSO, Budget Fiscal Administrator. Before you in your packet, you should have 5 documents, and we'll walk through several of those. The first document is pastel-colored summary, very high level, of the Governor, JAC, House, and Senate position. The second important document is what we call the summary sheet of the House action. It's on ledger-sized paper, 4 pages long. And then the next document is today's fiscal profile, in case you left your copy on the floor. And then finally, the last 2 copies, which we will not walk through in all likelihood in detail, but it is the actual text of all the House amendments and the Senate amendments. And we'll set those aside if it's acceptable. And I'll first speak to the 1-page high-level overview. Recall that the governor made a request for appropriations for the upcoming biennium. His total request was over $11 billion. However, there are 3 areas where you split up those: state capital construction, school capital construction, and rural health transformation. So we removed those 3 items from his total. In addition, since we have the governor listed here, we did not include the $30 million request from the Superintendent of Public Instruction for the Steamboat Legacy Scholarship account, because that was not a governor's request. Then we compare that to what JAC did, and you will see in total, JAC cut $319 million. In general funds, $480 million in total. Then on the House position, which we will be going through, they restored a number of the cuts from their action, and they ended up being $212.8 million higher than the JAC position and $106 million less than the governor's rec. So about a third of the way in between those 2 positions. And just for your reference, the Senate position actually spends $53 million more than the governor did in general funds, but a total savings of $1.4 million. So the Senate's position is very close in total to the governor's recs. Column J, which is highlighted in yellow in the bottom right hand, is perhaps the most important area for the next week discussions. And you will see that that's the House and Senate differences on HB 1, Senate File 1. The House or the Senate spent $160.5 million more in general funds than the House did, $32.7 million more in federal funds. The House actually outspent the Senate in other funds by $23.2 million, and all funds combined, there's a difference of $170 million. That's certainly a lot of money, but it is a relatively small percentage of an $10 billion budget. This summary reflects appropriations and reversions only, and I think that is often how members look at it. It is appropriations for purposes of spending. So this doesn't include revenue, it doesn't include transfers for savings, that sort of thing. It's how much money did each side appropriate with the intent that those funds would be expended. We also provided a quick note of the total number of amendments and how many were adopted. Ironically, you adopted the identical number of amendments on both sides, 37. It turns out the House had a few more. in total of 247 amendments total, and the Senate offered 72 amendments. The next item before we move into the specific amendments I do want to touch base on is the current day's goldenrod. And don't worry, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I do want to make a handful of observations. The first observation is the note at the bottom of page 1. That is something new that we don't always add. And more than anything, it is to bring those items to your attention where we have several bills that remain in conflict. House Bill 1 and Senate File 123, Senate File 123 is the economic funds, and I can't remember the exact name of the legislation sponsored by President Biden. Both House Bill 1 and that legislation, Senate File 123, both expend a portion of the 1% severance tax. So there's a conflict there that needs to be resolved at some.
Energy dominance, that one? Energy dominance?
Yes, energy dominance. Thank you, Mr. Senator. In addition, House Bill 1, Senate File 1, and Senator Hicks's Senate File 119 all contemplate the use, transfer, or redistribution of 2.5% of the investment earning stream generated by the PMTF. In other words, the SIPA account is being addressed in different ways. House Bill 1 and Senate File 119 have attempted to be resolved in the House amendments, but it is clunky, frankly. So just know that that is another area where the bills have potential conflict. The third area is Senate File 81, which I believe is the recalibration legislation, and Senate File 1. Both redistribute the balance in the SFRA, or School Foundation Program Reserve Account. That's the $88 million. Still opportunities to resolve that difference. And then finally, an oddity occurred, and we wanted to treat both houses equally. Senate File 104, which is the higher education research funding sponsored by Senator Scott, included an appropriation for $51.2 million. That action in committee of the whole in the Senate occurred after you completed your work on the budget bill. So you will see that you are out of balance, and so is the House, by roughly that amount, because it occurred after work on the budget. So that's kind of highlight number one. If you switch to page 2, you will see on the very bottom row, row 79, both the houses are about $45 million below the statutory reserve amount. You are not negative. The actual balance is shown there on line 77 of 146 million, but it's not quite the 5%. And the reason why you aren't, say, 7 million to the good is that $51 million piece of legislation that occurred after you concluded your work on the budget bill. I would also note on page 2, the LSRA, you will see pretty sizable decline in the overall balance for that fund. It's down to $810 million on the Senate position, $991 million on the House position. So a big question that we get from your colleagues, well, where did all that money go? Well, three areas. Number one, at the current Senate position, there is a transfer to the School Foundation Program in order to ensure a $100 million balance is made in this School Foundation Program, and that is in the amount of $348 million. That has to do with the school recalibration bill, the reduction in property taxes, the extension of the long-term homeowner property tax, and a few other smaller bills. So that's the biggest, or one of the largest reductions. A second area, you will see the SIPA, which appears on the bottom of page 3, also has been exhausted. But You will also see on page 5, if we could turn to page 5, the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund Reserve Account now has a balance of almost $950 million. Had you looked at that account at the beginning of session with, for example, the governor's recommendations, you would have seen that account would have been just $450 million. So that's where a lot of that savings that previously was in the LISRA, when you take everything into account, it's being shifted over into the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund because of the elimination of the SEPA, because of the change in the spending policies, and because of what was occurring in the budget bill. So it's not like all of that decline in the LSRA was spent. A good portion of it was moved from page 3 to page 5 of the profile. Finally, both sides did transfer funds. I think it was the GRU amendment in the Senate and the Bear amendment in the House to balance your budget, which came out of LSRA. I believe it was $350 million in the Senate version, $180 million in the House version. So there were some spending out of LSRA. At least I wanted to highlight some of the key points on the 350. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll pause, and the next item I'm going to walk through with the help of Polly Scott, Senior Fiscal Analyst, is the large ledger-sized sheet of the summary of the House position. But I'll pause if there are any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to highlight real quick, so from my understanding, we're not deficit spending, correct?
You have revenue sufficient to cover all of the actions that you've taken.
And so, and once again, well, just looking at these numbers as you point them out, that we're still balanced more or less with our reserves and cash allotments across the board. And it sounds like to me, from what I just heard, the difference between the House version and the Senate version right now is a lot smaller than it was before we started our amendment exercise. Would that be fair to say?
Mr. Chairman, that $160 million is not unusual. You know, some years it's very close, but I would have to look it up, but I think last year it was several $100 million difference between the two bodies. So this is certainly less than that amount. And when we get into the details, it's really explainable by 3 or 4 significant issues, the largest of which, frankly, is executive and judicial branch compensation, which was adopted on both sides. However, the funding source, the House used primarily what is referred to as other funds or a transfer, and the Senate used straight general funds. That's one significant difference. It's a funding choice, not an expenditure difference. And then the other large differences are UW, the Wyoming Business Council, and the restoration of the governor's recommendations.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, just a brief highlight before jumping in. The next step here is for you to go back. This session here is entirely educational. There is no vote at the end. We're here to prepare you to share this sheet with your colleagues this afternoon or tomorrow at the pleasure of the chairman and the presiding officer. So the whole purpose of today's meeting is really an education of you, so you're comfortable sharing with your colleagues the actions that the House took on the budget. When Joint Conference Committee gets appointed, they will have 3 motions on each of the amendments, either Senate or House. They can adopt, delete, or delete and further amend. Those 3 options, meaning you adopt the Senate position, delete the Senate positions, or delete and further amend, which means change the language or the amount within the 2 positions. Your amendment is quite a bit longer, frankly, than the House. So the House fits here on 4 pages. I think the Senate's position is a bit more complicated, frankly. So you should take some solace in the fact of sharing this with your colleagues. They're more discrete items. There are only 3 technically identical amendments. They appear on the first 3 items: House Third Reading Amendment number 7, third reading amendment number 9, second reading amendment number 28. None of them have any money associated with them. It is all language. You'll recall the Senate Crago amendment provided that the Department of Agriculture would not be subject to cost allocation for purposes of those boards. That's been a topic that's been discussed for 2 years now. Secondly, a restoration of predator management language in a footnote in the Department of Agriculture. This merely is a carryover footnote from last year that notes that the Game and Fish Commission shall approve the expenditure of their funds. And then third, State Parks and Cultural Resources. This was actually discussed at your Thursday, February 5th meeting when we did the walkthrough, and Representative Sherwood and then Senator Driscoll on the Senate side inserted that language. No new funding, but a designation of $996,000 could be used for the state archaeology work on human remains if they are identified. So all of those are the same on both sides. There are 2 other amendments that are nearly identical, which we will discuss later on, and there are several related. So jumping right into the related amendments, the first one is House Third Reading Amendment number 24. Chairman Baer had a nearly identical amendment to Chairman Salazar in the Senate. This is just the technical corrections amendment. There's nothing hidden in there. You can see we missed some words. We used the word relief rather than refund. We missed 3 commas. These are just staff improvements to the language. Why are they not identical? Well, the Senate and House had some other amendments that took care of some of these issues, so they were necessarily offset. The next amendment and second reading amendment number 18, Representative Williams on the House side, Senator Driscoll on the Senate side. This restored 2 employees and $295,000 at the State Fair grounds in Douglas. One of those positions was a senior buildings and grounds specialist, and another one was a maintenance operations support person. Why are they related? Well, the Driscoll's second reading amendment number 1 restored all the Gov's recs. This was a Gov's rec, so these are essentially the same in both houses. The last one on page 1 is Representative Lean's second reading amendment number 21. The Driscoll amendment, in this case, is not the same. The Driscoll amendment removed these funds from the Senate bill. This was the $3 million for ICACs, or the Internet Crimes Against Children's team. Representative Lean did not change the money directly, but she tied that $3 million to the Raven Act, which is Senate File 85, and said if the Raven Act passes, this $3 million goes away and we use whatever appropriation is in the Raven Act. Today, that appropriation is at $1.6 million. So it would be lower than the $3 million in the budget. I'll pass it off to Ms. Scott for page 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Starting at the top of page 2, I'll just walk through. All of these on this page are related to the Senate Amendment 2001, which was the large amendment in the Senate, as you know. So House Second Reading Amendment 22, sponsored by Geringer in the Department of Environmental Quality, restores a governor's recommendation of $500,000 special revenue for new source review modeling and permitting support. That was basically the same action in the S 2001. The next line, H, Third Reading Amendment 11, sponsored by Byron, also similar to the Driscoll in the Department of Audit, increases $194,000 special revenue and 1 full-time employee, as well as the necessary technology, hardware, and software associated with that position for a partial restoration of the governor's recommendation for a new entry-level bank examiner. The governor's recommendation was 3. The next line, House Second Reading Amendment 36, sponsored by Baer, in the Department of Transportation Operational Services. This reduces $685,000 internal service funds for the operation of one state-owned jet, and additionally amends footnote number 5 so that the total is reflected in that footnote. And the Driscoll amendment was removing that footnote 5. Then the House second reading amendment 49, sponsored by Lean in the Department of Health, amends footnote number 1 to insert the modifier elective prior to the word abortion in 4 instances. And the Driscoll amendment was removing that footnote. Then the third reading amendment, 29 on the House side, sponsored by Sherwood, amends footnote 4. It increases the amount specified for developmental disability provider rates from the general fund and federal funds. It moves more into that category and then eliminates that amount in footnote number 5.
And Mr. Chairman, I know the committee spent the interim talking about this, so there's no change in funding. The House position is higher for provider rates and less money for the wait list. And the Senate had that, maintains the JAC position of the split between both rates and the wait list.
Given then, on the House side?
Mr. Chairman, they removed 4.5 million general funds and federal funds from the wait list.
And what's left?
Nothing specified for the reduction of the wait list.
The governor did have some money in there, but nothing specified for that wait list. He used the language, I believe it was the emergency committee.
Okay.
Moving to the next row, Mr. Chairman, House third reading amendment 31, sponsored by Clouston, in the Department of Health, in the behavioral health program, restores the governor's recommendation of the preschool external cost adjustment and increases $10.3 million general fund. The next row, the House third reading amendment 35, sponsored by Lucas, on the livestock board, reduces $300,000 general fund and eliminates footnote 1 that was specifying that appropriation for procurement and distribution of metal ear tags as livestock identification options. And so that was the same action on both the Driscoll and the Lucas. Then the
Polly, sorry, could we go back one to the behavioral health?
yes.
The Clausen amendment, give me the narrative again, why this is different, what's the difference between our two positions?
Mr. Chairman, they're nearly identical. There is a small difference in the amount.
No, Mr. Chairman, I believe the amount is the same. It is a line within the Driscoll amendment as opposed to the entirety of the amendment.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, moving on to second reading amendment 68, sponsored by Lawley on the House side, on the University of Wyoming state aid. This restores the governor's recommendation of $6 million general fund for the support of UW athletic operations. And that's the same on the Senate side. Then House third reading amendment 59, sponsored by Heiner, on the University of Wyoming, amends footnote number 4 to specify that the qualified management consultant shall conduct the external financial review of the Center of Innovation for Flow-Through Porous Media and the High Bay Research Facility in conjunction with the Management Council. And so that is modifying that footnote, whereas the Senate was removing that footnote. Then moving on to House third reading amendment 60, sponsored by Harshman, which was ultimately deleted by House third reading amendment 120, sponsored by Baer. Those two, we'll just kind of go over those together. The Harshman restores the $40 million to general fund to the state aid and adds a footnote, number 12, which specifies that UW will do a comprehensive review of the organizational structure and staffing and specifies 5 requirements for that review. It also then specifies that UW will submit an operational plan to the governor and the Joint Appropriations Committee. And if the plan does not achieve at least $5 million in cost savings by December 1st of 2026, the JAC may propose to decrease the general fund appropriation of $40 million. So that was where the House started. And then the very next line, which is the bare third reading amendment 120, deletes Harshman and then is very similar, is quite similar from that point on, with the exception of the amount is restoring 20 million general funds. Then the comprehensive review of the organization, there are 2 additional requirements put on. And so I'll just walk through the 7 requirements. One, they're to do this review in conjunction with the 7 requirements related to 1, duplicative positions, 2, opportunities to consolidate, 3, evaluation with similar post-secondary institutions and industry standards, 4, recommendations to reduce positions, 5, identify cost savings and investment opportunities, and then the additional ones in the bare are 6, recommendations for opportunities to eliminate degree programs, and 7, recommendations for opportunities to limit any diversity, equity, and inclusion program activities or functions. And then the requirements for the operational plan are the same. Okay, then if there are no questions, we'll just move on to House Third Reading Amendment 66, sponsored by Geringer, which is on the Business Council. And what this amendment does is it restores half of the standard budget for 2 of the 3 divisions that are in the Wyoming Business Council, less 1 program, which is the Small Business Innovation Research Program. And then it also modifies and moves footnote number 1 and adds footnote number 2. So footnote number 2 is on the agency, and it specifies the appropriation is for 1 year, basically. And the intent is to include any requested amounts in the agency's budget request. Then just the rest of that note there gives you the amounts that are restored to the 2 divisions in the Business Council: 4.9 million general funds and 145,000 special revenue to the Wyoming Business Council division. And then it moves footnote 1 to the Economic Diversification Division, which is restoring 3.7 million general funds, 157,000 federal funds, and 846,000 special revenue. And the footnote 1 specifies that any reductions to strategic partners shall be proportionate. The last one on this page is on one of our boards and commissions. It's on the Board of Barber Examiners. It was sponsored by Harshman, House Third Reading Amendment 78, and it increases $4,000 special revenue for in-state travel, which restores the governor's recommendation, which was $3,000.
Mr. Chairman, before moving on to page 3, I did want to clarify on the developmental disabilities. The governor requested and JAC approved $3 million for the wait list, but that is not footnoted. It's just in the Gov's rec at that amount, $3 million. So you asked how much was left. $3 million was requested for the wait list. You put in an additional 4.5 million general funds, 4.5 million federal funds, total of 9 million additional. Moving to page 3, The First Amendment is House Second Reading Amendment number 4, the Harshman Amendment. Relates to the Rare Earths Energy Matching Fund loan. The only change here is the choice of fund. On the House side, it is being taken out of the SIPA account as opposed to the LSRA. Third Reading Amendment number 88, Speaker Nyman's amendment. Both houses had reverted $54.9 million for the BRC program, Business Ready Community Program. The Senate side reinserted those funds for Business Ready Community Program. The House position was to reinsert those funds with a distribution for county consensus funding. You'll recall that it's been about 15 years or so since we've had county consensus funding, but all municipalities in the county commission would have to agree. Actually, I think it's 50% of them would have to agree on the projects within each of those counties. I believe you had a Senator Steinmetz amendment on on this bill. House Third Reading Amendment number 90, the Bear Amendment. This is only a perfection amendment, saying that Section 319, which is largely duplicative of Senate File 21, is not enacted if Senate File 21 is enacted. House Second Reading Amendment number 2110, the Sherwood Amendment. This is one of those where I'll say is nearly identical. The difference between the House and the Senate position on this are 2 words for proposal. Technically, I would argue that either one works, but there are just 2 words, so you could pick. The Senate one, I will concede, is probably a little better language, but they do identical things. House Third Reading Amendment, and this is to change the business relocation incentive into a contract approach. House Third Reading Amendment number 93. This increased the Hathaway Scholarship Awards. So Senator Driscoll's Second Reading Amendment eliminated this from the bill. The Harshman Amendment increases these pretty significantly. The honors would be equal to 100% of tuition. The next category, or performance, would get 75%, and then the opportunity scholarships would get 50%. This nets out to be a 60.7% increase in the Hathaway Scholarship from the current levels. 60%.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we had 30, and that was an add-on which got taken out with Gov's Rec. But there's a bill floating around. The bills, is that bill still in play? That bill's still in play somewhere.
I believe it is.
And it's 50%.
I believe it is 40.
And has some of these same same categories, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator, it is 40%.
40. Okay. Thank you.
House Third Reading Amendment number 122. The reason why this is similar to Senator Larson's amendment, this is for the Trails program. I think on the Senate side, the amount was 1.2 million, and it was administered by the Office of State Lands, and it was appropriated for a specific project in north central Wyoming. The Senate's position was 1/3 of that, $400,000. It was directed to State Parks and Cultural Resources, and it requires a match 1-to-1, and it is administered as a grant opportunity, not a specified trail system. This is the second and last one that is nearly identical, I will say. House Second Reading Amendment number 113, Representative Washit, combined with Third Reading Amendment number 95, Representative Lean. The first portion of this is identical for the shooting complex to Senator Larson's amendment in the Senate side, in terms of funding that with $2.5 million from the Tourism Reserve, $2.5 million from the Game and Fish Fund, previously appropriated in both cases, and reverting $5 million of unused funds. That's why you'll see the negative $5 million there. The House added on a subsection specifying that the intent of the legislature is no general funds, LSRA, or SIPA shall be expended going forward on this project. House Third Reading Amendment number 98, the Bear Amendment. very similar to Senate third reading amendment number 50, also sponsored by Senator Driscoll, regarding the concessionaire at the Hot Springs State Park. The difference here is the Senate's position is $500,000 larger from the internal funds of the state park. House third reading amendment number 99, the Sherwood amendment, is very similar to second reading amendment number 1, Driscoll's amendment. Both of them provide a net or a total amount of $111 million. This is reduced by the amount that is already in the budget bill for nurses, highway patrolmen, and snowplow drivers, because you put in that language, they don't get to double dip. The House position is different in two ways, however. Number one, they provided a 13th check, or 1% COLA for all retirees funded out of general funds in the amount of $8,031,000. And secondly, that is one time, that is not ongoing. The source of funding for this is a diversion of half of the 1% severance tax, or 0.5% severance tax for both years of the biennium, FY 27 and 28. House third reading amendment number 123, very similar to the Senate side, Senator Garou and Senator Crago's budget balancer amendments, although different amounts. The House needed $180 million. The Senate needed $350 million from the LSRA, and the Senate did a step further by appropriating funds from the LSRA to SIPA as well. Continuing on page 4, House third reading amendment number 4, Representative Larson's amendment. This is a new concept, was not discussed in JAC, adds 3 positions and $425,000 for custodial and facility management, as well as utility payments at the Riverton State Office Building. House third reading amendment number 18. All of these on this page are unrelated, nothing that the Senate did, so that it was a convenient page break. House third reading amendment number 18. This provided a loan from the PMTF to the Department of Transportation in the amount of $100 million and specified 6 specific road projects that would be completed. They also indicated that the interest rate would be equal to the return on the PMTF, but not to exceed 2.5%. And that those loans would be repaid no later than the end of the biennium from funds in SIPA, hence our conflict with Senate File 119. House third reading amendment number 41, no money associated with this. The application of the footnote applies to community college sports as well as UW sports, and specifically specifies that no general fund shall be expended for student athlete salaries. House third reading amendment number 79, Representative Baer. In the event Senate File 119, which is the elimination of SIPA, is not enacted, this amendment would have the same transfers occur for the period of the budget. So if Senate File 119 fails, all of those transfers that would have occurred under Senate File 119 would occur just for the period of the budget, fiscal year 27 and 28. House third reading amendment number 116 provided an additional $100,000 for an audit of the Wyoming Business Council, a forensic audit regarding recently expended funds. House third reading amendment number 121, you may recall this from last year. This was reduced to $30,000. The source of funds it was $35,000 last year using general funds. This year it's $30,000 using tourism account funds for purposes of retrieving, developing, and curating a display of the 1893 Forest Reserve Party tree. Finally, last is House third reading amendment number 125. This makes modifications to statute for the period of the budget for 2 years. It essentially does 2 things. Number one, it changes the date for the 25% tax exemption on residential property this year to May 2026. And secondly, going forward, the date would be March 1st for tax years 2027 and 2028. It also specifies that for those 2 tax years, if a primary residence is sold and another residence is repurchased within Wyoming, the months of residency in both shall count towards your residency requirement on the 25% exemption to residential property taxes. With that, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions.
So,
We'll get to printing immediately then.
okay. Is there anything else that we were dealing with today other than this?
Mr. Chairman, you have House bills, but we need to visit about Senate files as well.
Yeah. I think we were going to start some of those bills tomorrow. We were concentrating on this today.
We got lots of time.
Yeah, so I think it's my preference to start those bills starting tomorrow. We're going to be having appropriation meetings all this week, and I think we'll have plenty of time to get through them. So with that, Director Richards, anything else? Polly, anything else? Okay. With that, I will adjourn until tomorrow then. Thank you.